at Blackwood Manor. A name whispered in hushed tones, a place where darkness clung to the very stones. They found her in the parlor, sprawled out like a macabre puppet, her once vibrant dress now a canvas of crimson. The local constable, a man hardened by years of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer, still recoiled at the sight. Her eyes, wide with a terror that lingered even in death, stared vacantly at the cobwebbed chandelier above. This wasn't a simple case of violence, no crime of passion gone wrong. This reeked of something ancient, something evil that had seeped into the very foundation of the manor. Every creaking floorboard, every gust of wind that howled through the broken windows whispered tales of unspeakable horrors. The air hung heavy, thick with the metallic tang of blood and the cloying scent of decay. It clung to the back of your throat, a constant reminder of the violence that had unfolded within those walls. Blackwood Manor held its secrets close, but tonight, those secrets would begin to unravel. The old caretaker, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by time and terror, spoke of the manor's dark history. He told of a family consumed by greed, their souls stained with betrayal and murder. They met their end within these very walls, victims of their own insatiable hunger for power. Their spirits, unable to find peace, remained trapped, their rage echoing through the halls like a malevolent wind. He spoke of cold spots, of disembodied whispers and shadows that danced at the edge of vision, but his words, laced with fear and superstition, fell on deaf ears. The constable, a man of logic and reason, dismissed them as the ramblings of an old man's fading mind. He would soon learn, however, that some legends are rooted in a truth far more terrifying than any fairy tale. Nightfall descended upon Blackwood Manor, casting long, menacing shadows that stretched and contorted like phantoms themselves. The investigation continued, each footstep echoing in the oppressive silence, a constant reminder that they were not alone. The constable, torch held high, followed a trail of blood that snaked its way through the manor like a venomous serpent. It led him to a hidden room, its entrance concealed behind a tapestry so faded it seemed to blend into the darkness. The air grew colder, the stench of death more potent. He pushed open the door, its rusted hinges groaning in protest, and stepped inside. The room was bare, stripped of furniture, its walls adorned with strange symbols etched into the plaster. In the center, a pool of blood glistened under the flickering light of his torch. And then he saw it, a single blood-soaked glove discarded in the corner. It was a woman's glove, delicate and finely crafted, a stark contrast to the brutality of the scene before him. The constable picked it up, the leather cold and stiff between his fingers. He brought it close to his face, inhaling sharply. A faint floral scent lingered on the fabric, a chilling reminder of the life that had been so cruelly extinguished. As he stood there, the weight of the glove heavy in his hand, the room seemed to shift around him. The air crackled with unseen energy, and the shadows on the walls danced with renewed vigor. He swore he could hear the faint echo of a woman's scream, a tortured wail that sent shivers down his spine. He closed his eyes, willing the visions away, but they only intensified. He saw flashes of the murder, brutal and swift, the glint of a blade, the splatter of blood against the wall, the victim, her face contorted in pain and terror, reaching out for mercy that never came, the killer, a shadowy figure, their face obscured by darkness, their movements cold and calculated. The constable stumbled back, dropping the glove as if it burned him. He had seen enough death for one lifetime, but this was different. This was evil, pure and simple. He stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. As he turned to leave, his gaze fell upon a large portrait hanging above the fireplace. It depicted a beautiful woman, her raven hair cascading down her shoulders, her eyes a piercing blue that seemed to follow his every move. But there was something off about the painting, something unsettling. The woman's lips were slightly parted, as if frozen in a silent scream. And her eyes, those piercing blue eyes, seemed to burn with an unnatural intensity. The constable stared at the portrait, mesmerized. He couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in the painting was trying to tell him something, warn him of the danger that lurked within the manor's walls. He reached out a hand to touch the canvas, his fingers tracing the outline of the woman's face. As he did, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing his torch and plunging him into darkness. Panic surged through him as he fumbled for his flint and steel, his heart pounding against his ribs. The shadows seemed to press in closer, suffocating him with their unseen presence. He could hear whispers now all around him, hissing his name, taunting him. Finally, he managed to strike a spark, the sudden light revealing the room once more. But something was different. The portrait, once a silent sentinel, now depicted the woman with her mouth agape in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror. And then he heard it. A blood-curdling scream that echoed through the empty halls of the manor. It was the same scream he had heard in his vision, the scream of the murdered woman. The constable spun around, his Ravenwood Forest. Even its name sent shivers down the spines of the bravest souls, those who dared to speak it aloud. Locals whispered of ancient curses, of restless spirits that roamed the dense undergrowth, their cries echoing through the trees like tortured souls. It was here, deep within the heart of this forbidding wilderness, that a group of hikers stumbled upon a sight that would forever haunt their dreams. They had strayed from the marked path, lured deeper and deeper by the promise of adventure and the thrill of the unknown. The sun, a pale disk struggling to pierce the thick canopy of leaves, cast long, eerie shadows that danced and twisted around them like phantoms. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation, a smell that clung to their clothes and skin. It was then that they saw it, a small wooden sign, its paint faded and peeling, nailed to a gnarled tree trunk. The words, barely legible, sent a chill down their spines. "Turn back, all ye who enter here." Ignoring the ominous warning, curiosity overriding common sense, they pressed onward. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to form a suffocating canopy. They stumbled upon a clearing, a small cabin nestled in the center, its windows dark and lifeless. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, a sign that someone or something was home. A sense of unease settled over them, a primal fear that whispered of unseen danger. As they approached cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of pine needles, they noticed something strange. The ground around the cabin was littered with bones, bleached white by the sun, picked clean and eerily silent. One of the hikers, a young woman named Sarah, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The bones were human. They exchanged uneasy glances, their initial curiosity replaced by a growing sense of dread. Something was terribly wrong here. They had to get out, and fast. But before they could turn back, the cabin door creaked open, revealing a figure that sent shivers down their spines. He was an old man, his face weathered and tanned like leather, his eyes as cold and unforgiving as the forest itself. He wore a ragged coat made of animal skins, and a hunting knife hung from his belt, its blade glinting ominously in the fading light. He looked at them, a slow smile spreading across his face, revealing teeth stained a sickly yellow. "Well now," he rasped, his voice like the creak of old branches, "what have we here? Lost your way, have you?" His words hung in the air, thick with menace. They had stumbled into something dark and dangerous, they realized, and there was no turning back. He invited them inside, his tone leaving no room for argument. The interior of the cabin was dark and cramped, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke and something else, something metallic and cloying. Animal heads, their eyes vacant and staring, adorned the walls, trophies of a bygone era. The old man offered them food and drink, his hospitality as unsettling as his appearance. They ate and drank sparingly, their eyes darting nervously around the room, their senses on high alert. As the hours passed, he regaled them with tales of the forest, his voice a low monotone that seemed to weave a spell around them. He spoke of creatures that lurked in the shadows, of ancient rituals and sacrifices, of souls forever bound to the woods. His words, at first dismissed as the ramblings of a madman, began to worm their way into their minds, planting seeds of doubt and fear. Sarah, unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her like a shroud, excused herself and wandered into the back of the cabin. There she stumbled upon a sight that sent a wave of nausea crashing over her. In a small, windowless room illuminated by a single flickering candle, hung rows upon rows of dried herbs, animal bones, and other strange and disturbing objects. And in the center of the room, laid out on a rough-hewn table, was a human figure. It was a young man, his skin pale and waxy, his eyes closed as if in peaceful slumber. But as Sarah drew closer, she saw the truth. His chest had been sliced open, his ribs spread apart like a macabre work of art. His heart was missing. Terror lent her speed. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. She had to warn the others, had to get them out of this nightmare. But as she turned to flee, she came face to face with the old man, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. He was holding a blood-stained knife in his hand, the same knife she had seen on his belt earlier. Curiosity killed the cat, he rasped, his voice a chilling whisper. And now, it's your turn. He lunged at her, the knife flashing in the dim light. Sarah screamed, a primal scream of terror that echoed through the empty cabin. And then, all hell broke loose, plunging them into a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. The night was a real heartbreaker, fellas. The kind that chills you to the bone even if you're sporting a coat lined with adamantium. Fog, thick as pea soup, rolled in off Hollow Creek, clinging to everything like a bad habit. Street lamps cast weak yellow circles, doing little more than highlighting the grime on the cobblestones. Yeah, this was Hollow Creek, a town with more shadows than secrets, and believe me, it had plenty of both. See, I'd heard whispers, rumors of a phantom, a specter that haunted the docks. Folks said it was the ghost of a sailor, lost at sea, come back for revenge. Now, I've seen my fair share of things most folks wouldn't believe, but ghosts? Let's just say I'm not the type to get spooked easily. Still, there was something about this town, this fog, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The air was thick with the smell of salt and something else, something metallic, something that made my stomach churn. It was the smell of fear, folks, and it clung to the fog like a shroud. I took a deep breath, letting the night settle around me. This was my kind of case, the kind that made your gut clench and your blood run cold. I adjusted the fedora on my head, the brim casting a shadow over my eyes. Time to dig into this mystery. Time to find out if the Phantom of Hollow Creek was just another ghost story or something far more sinister. The first scream ripped through the silence like a switchblade. It was a raw, primal sound that sent shivers down my spine. I moved, instinct taking over, my footsteps echoing on the damp cobblestones. The scream was followed by another and another, each one laced with terror, each one urging me closer to the docks. The fog seemed to part as I approached, revealing a scene straight out of a nightmare. A group of dock workers huddled together, their faces pale with fear, their eyes wide with terror. They pointed towards a shadowy figure at the edge of the pier, a figure that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence. It was him. The Phantom, one of the dock workers stammered, his voice trembling. He took her, dragged her into the water, just like the others. I didn't need any more convincing. Something wicked was at play here, something that preyed on the innocent. And I'll be damned if I was going to let it get away with it. The dock was slick with seawater and something else, something that glistened under the dim light of the moon. Blood. A trail of it led to the edge of the pier, disappearing into the murky depths below. Whoever this phantom was, he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. I crouched down, examining the blood more closely. It was fresh, still warm to the touch. And there was something else, something caught in the moonlight, something that glinted like a shard of ice. I reached down and picked it up, my fingers brushing against something cold and hard. It was a necklace. A silver locket shaped like a heart. The locket was cold in my hand, the metal slick with blood. I popped it open, revealing a faded photograph of a young woman with laughing eyes and a warm smile. She was beautiful, full of life. And now she was gone, another victim claimed by the darkness that clung to Hollow Creek. I slipped the locket into my pocket, a promise forming on my lips. I would find her killer, the one they called the Phantom. I would bring him to justice, even if it was the last thing I did. The next few days were a blur of questioning witnesses, chasing down leads and navigating the treacherous labyrinth of Hollow Creek's underworld. Everyone had heard of the Phantom, but no one had seen his face. He was a ghost story, a boogeyman whispered about in hushed tones, but ghost stories don't leave trails of blood. and they don't rip away innocent lives. No, this was something far more real, far more sinister. I could feel it in my gut, a knot of tension that refused to loosen its grip. The whispers followed me everywhere I went, in the smoky haze of back-alley gambling dens, in the hushed conversations of waterfront bars, in the fearful glances of the townsfolk. The phantom was always there, lurking just out of sight, a spectre haunting my every move. But I wasn't afraid. Fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had a job to do, a promise to keep, and I was going to see it through, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and the fog continued to blanket Hollow Creek in its suffocating embrace. Just when I thought I was getting nowhere, a break came from an unlikely source. The old lighthouse keeper, a grizzled old salt with eyes that had seen too much. He told me about a legend, a story whispered among sailors for generations. The phantom wasn't a ghost, he said, but a man driven mad by grief and consumed by vengeance. They called him Captain Blackheart, and he blamed the town of Hollow Creek for the death of his beloved wife. He swore revenge, the old man rasped, his voice hoarse with age. Said he'd make the town pay in blood. He pointed to a spot on a weathered map, a small, secluded cove hidden from view. That's where he took her, he said, his voice barely a whisper. That's where you'll find him. The cove was just as the old man described, a secluded crescent of beach shrouded in shadow. Well, folks, that's the story of the Phantom of Hollow Creek. Another case closed, another shadow banished to the darkness, but out here on the edge of civilization, the shadows never truly disappear, do they? They just wait for their moment to rise again. Until next time, this is Ryan, reminding you to keep your eyes open and your wits about you. You never know what lurks in the fog.